She never thought you'd actually leave. And for the longest time, neither did you. That's the thing about people. We assume that what's familiar will always be there. We grow accustomed to routine, to presence, to someone showing up day after day, no matter how they're treated. There's this unspoken contract. You'll stay even if I stop trying. Your source for wisdom, even if I stop seeing you, even if I stop valuing you. And that's what happened. She thought your patience was infinite, your source for wisdom, that your love means endurance, not standards, but love without respect is just submission. And submission always has an expiration date, especially for someone slowly waking up to the weight of their own worth. She believed you'd stay because you always had. You tolerated more than you should have. You forgave more than was wise. You explained yourself in circles, hoping one day she'd finally hear you. But every time you stayed, even after being dismissed or disregarded, it sent a message: I'm not going anywhere, not out of weakness, but out of hope, your source for wisdom. And that's a dangerous kind of hope, one that blinds you to reality while you wait for someone to catch up to the love you've already given. But here's a truth most people don't want to admit it: consistency isn't always healthy. Loyalty isn't always noble. Sometimes it becomes a cage we lock ourselves in because we're terrified of being alone. So we rationalize, we minimize the wounds. We call it love when it's really just fear in disguise. She didn't think you'd leave, your source for wisdom, because she had learned to mistake your kindness for dependence. She mistook your silence for agreement. And she believed the illusion that your presence was permanent, that your heart belonged to her no matter how she treated it. That was the lie she told herself. He'll never go. He needs me too much, eh? But then you did leave, quietly, without fireworks, without slamming doors, just a decision, calm, resolute, final, not because you stopped loving her, but because you finally started loving yourself more. And in that moment, the illusion shattered. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away, not to prove a point, but to prove to yourself that you still have one. It never starts with something dramatic. That's the danger. It starts quietly. Subtle shifts that are easy to brush off. A tone in her voice that wasn't there before. A look that lingers just a second too long with someone else. A conversation that feels colder, more transactional. You try to convince yourself it's just stress, or she's tired, or maybe you're the one being too sensitive. You rationalize it because you care, because you want to keep the peace, because you're invested. But over time, those small things accumulate, they pile up, not like thunderclaps, but like dripping water, and it wears you down. The red flags aren't waving violently, they're fluttering just softly enough that you doubt your own vision. That's what makes it so insidious. You're not dealing with obvious betrayal or cruelty. You're dealing with indifference, with absence, with a growing emotional vacancy that you keep trying to fill by loving harder, by doing more, by becoming smaller. And still you wait. You keep showing up, hoping she'll notice the slow erosion of what once was. But the truth is, she already noticed. She just didn't think it mattered enough to fix. You keep convincing yourself that if you're just a little more patient, a little more forgiving, things will go back to the way they were. But they never do, because this isn't about one fight or one bad day. It's about a consistent pattern of disregard that's been quietly unfolding right in front of you. Your source for visually, you realize it's not that she didn't see your hurt, it's that she didn't take it seriously. You were bleeding out emotionally, and she was handing you a tissue, and still you told yourself to stay strong, to be the bigger person, your source for wisdom, to not give up. But there's a difference between endurance and denial, and staying in a place where you're not seen, not heard, your source for wisdom. Not value that as a denial of your own worth. What we tolerate becomes the standard. And if you spend enough time ignoring those quiet red flags, one day you'll wake up and realize you've taught someone how to mistreat you by never saying enough. There comes a moment, a quiet, piercing moment where something inside you just shifts. It's not rage, your source for wisdom. It's not even sadness anymore. It's clarity. You sit there, maybe in the same room where so many apologies were made, your source for wisdom, or maybe not made at all. And you realize you've been fighting for someone who's not fighting with you, or even for you. You've mistaken your ability to endure for strength. You've called your loyalty love when really it was fear. Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of admitting to yourself that what you were holding on to was already gone. That's the turning point. And it doesn't explode like a dramatic scene in a movie. It lands softly like the final grain of sand that tips the scale. Yours for wisdom. You're not angry anymore. You're awake. Awake to the way you've been negotiating your dignity just to stay connected. Awake to the quiet compromises you made with yourself over and over for the sake of keeping the relationship alive. But love isn't supposed to cost your identity. It isn't supposed to ask you to forget who you are so someone else can feel more comfortable. So you stop. You stop chasing, stop explaining, stop twisting yourself into versions that will never be enough for someone who doesn't even know what they're looking for. You stop giving access to your heart without requiring accountability. And for the first time in a long time, you choose you, not out of spite, not to get even, but because something deeper in you knows it's time. Time to stop asking for the bare minimum. Time to stop mistaking survival for happiness. It's one of the hardest decisions you'll ever make because part of you still loves her. Part of you still hopes she'll turn around, finally get it, finally see you. But that part no longer gets to make the choices. Not anymore. You've spent enough time waiting, enough time shrinking, enough time bleeding slowly under the weight of emotional inconsistency. And now you choose self-respect, your source form, because there's a moment in every life when a man has to decide, will I keep settling for being tolerated or will I demand to be valued? And when that moment comes, you don't just walk away from her. You walk back to yourself. After you leave, something strange happens, not to you, at least not first. It happens to her, the same woman who never thought you'd go, who believed, consciously or not, that your presence was permanent, begins to notice something missing. But it's not just the absence of your body, it's the absence of your energy, the absence of that quiet, reliable strength that always steadied the space around her. The emotional ground she walked on every day without even realizing it was you holding it steady beneath her feet. At first, your source for wisdom, it doesn't hit her. People rarely feel the weight of what they've lost right away. There's a kind of arrogance and neglect, a belief that what's been given will always be there. So she scrolls through her phone, half expecting a message from you, but it doesn't come. She looks around her life and senses a stillness that didn't used to be there. It's no wisdom. It's not peaceful. It's hollow. Something feels off. And for the first time, she can't point the finger at you because now you're gone. And it's in that silence, that absence, that she begins to feel it. The aftershock, your source for wisdom. That's the thing people don't understand. Your leaving wasn't loud, but its echo was. The void you left behind is full of all the things she stopped appreciating, the comfort of your voice, wisdom, the way you listened even when she barely spoke, the way you held space for her emotions, even while yours went unheard. You were the foundation, and now the house feels unstable. She thought she could replace presence with assumption, intimacy with control, for wisdom, love with convenience. But real presence, that's not replaceable. It leaves a void so specific, so uniquely shaped that no one else can quite fill it. And now she starts to remember not just what you did, but what you were. The protector, the quiet supporter, the man who stayed long after he should have left just to see if maybe, just maybe, things could still be saved. But you did leave, not to hurt her, but because staying was hurting you. And now she's left with a mirror she can't look away from. Not because you shamed her, but because your absence forced her to confront what she took for granted. And that is its own kind of justice, not loud, not cruel, just you true. See, people don't realize that silence speaks, that the lack of a presence once taken for granted can become deepening for wisdom. And when it finally hits her, when she fully understands that you're not coming back, that's when she begins to wrestle with the cost of everything she ignored. And maybe she'll change, maybe she won't. That's not your concern anymore, because you didn't leave to teach her a lesson. You left because you finally learned your own. There's an incredible power in letting go, not the kind born out of anger or revenge, but the quiet kind that comes when you've made peace with reality. Letting go isn't weakness. It's not failure. In fact, it may be the strongest thing you ever do, because it requires you to stop hoping for a different version of someone who's already shown you who they are. It demands you face truth without flinching, to acknowledge that you've been holding on to potential instead of a person. Most people stay because it's easier. It's easier to cling to familiarity than to face the uncertainty of what comes next. But that comfort is deceptive. It keeps you stuck in a cycle, hoping, bending, compromising, waiting. And the longer you stay, the more you convince yourself that your suffering has meaning, that it's noble to endure, that one day they'll see you and say, you were right all along. But that moment doesn't always come. And even if it did, is that really the life you want? One where you need to be broken before someone finally decides you're worthy. Letting go isn't giving up on love. It's giving up on convincing someone to love you the way you deserve. That's the difference. You're not walking away from connection. You're walking toward one that honors you. And in that act, you reclaim something vital, your self-respect. The truth is, you don't find your strength by holding on. You find it the moment you decide that you will no longer beg for what should be freely given, that your peace matters more than their comfort, that your future matters more than your history. And you stop trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. You let go. And yes, it hurts. But so does staying small in a space you've outgrown. So does dimming your light just to keep someone else comfortable in the shadows. So does handing your soul to someone who never learned how to hold it. But when you finally release it all, not just the person, but the weight of proving your worth, you discover a peace that doesn't depend on anyone else's recognition. And that's when you realize letting go wasn't the end. It was the beginning of you coming back to life. After all the silence, after the weight of walking away, after the ache of letting go, there's something else waiting. It's not fireworks. It's not a dramatic, cinematic rebirth. It's something quieter, steadier. It's a new chapter, one you write with your own hand. One that begins the moment you realize that love is not supposed to cost you you. In the past, you may have loved recklessly. Maybe you gave too much. Maybe you forgot yourself trying to hold on to someone else. It's easy to do, especially when you're a man wired for loyalty, for protection, for making things work. But the problem is, you learn to disappear in the name of devotion. And now you love differently, not colder, but clearer, not with walls, but with wisdom. You understand something now that you didn't before. Boundaries don't ruin love, they protect it. They protect you. Love isn't proven by how much you're willing to endure. It's revealed in how well you preserve your sense of self while sharing space with another. Because without that, what are you really offering? A hollow version of yourself, a man who gives everything but forgets who he is. You don't want that anymore, and you won't accept it from anyone else either. Now, if someone wants access to your heart, it has to come with mutual effort, mutual respect, and mutual growth. You're not here to complete anyone. You're not here to be a project or a placeholder or a peacekeeper. You're not begging to be chosen. You're choosing to. This new chapter, it's not about bitterness. It's not about closing yourself off. It's about alignment. You've spent enough time bending. Now you're standing. You've learned how to love with strength, not sacrifice. How to give without disappearing. How to stay without settling. And if someone enters your life now, they'll meet a man who knows his value, who's done the work, who carries the scars not as wounds, but as proof that he knows what it means to give deeply and what it costs when you give to someone who cannot hold it. You no longer seek chaos and call it passion. You no longer confuse attachment with connection. What you want now is real, honest, grounded. And if it doesn't align with the peace you fought to find, you'll walk away without hesitation. Not because you're cold, but because you finally understand you don't have to lose yourself to love someone else. And when that moment comes, when you meet someone who sees you, honors you, walks beside you without asking you to shrink, that's when you'll know everything you let go of was simply clearing the way for something worthy to begin. And so here you are, not broken, rebuilt, wiser, a man who stayed far longer than he should have, not because he was weak, but because he believed in something deeply. And yet, when the moment came, when the silence grew louder than the promises, when the weight of staying cost more than the fear of leaving, you chose yourself. That choice, that moment, that was the beginning, your source for wisdom. She never thought you'd actually leave because she mistook your devotion for dependency. She didn't understand that real strength isn't how long you stay. It's in knowing when it's time to go. And when you did, everything changed for her, yes. But more importantly for you, you'll stop trying to be understood by someone who never took the time to listen. You stop offering your heart to someone who held it like it was replaceable. And in that space, after the silence, after the age, your source for wisdom, after the doubt, you rediscovered the one thing that had been missing all along you. Now you walk differently, not with arrogance, but with certainty. Not because you've hardened, but because you've healed. You know what you bring to the table. You know what it cost you to get here. And you'll never again give that away cheaply. Let this be the message egg. Your presence is not a given. Your loyalty is not infinite. And your love is not unconditional when it comes at the expense of your soul. If someone wants to walk beside you, they must understand what that means. And if don't, you'll keep walking anyway. You'll cuss for wisdom, because man who finally leaves is not the one who gave up. He's the one who finally remembered his worth, your source for wisdom. And once you remember your worth, there's no going back.